Today on Sekulow, the House Oversight Committee chairman takes on the FBI over the alleged Biden bribery scheme.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
Hey, welcome to Sekulow. We are taking your calls at 1-800-684-3110 on this. Going into a holiday weekend, we'd love to hear from you and get your thoughts on a number of the issues we'll be talking about. Some new ACLJ work as well. The ACLJ getting more and more active in court. I know that I'll have some more updates for you even after the Memorial Day holiday next week about more ACLJ actions in federal courts across the country defending your rights. So we're excited about that, excited to spend more time talking about that on the broadcast. But I first wanted to go to was there's back and forth between the FBI and Congress over a whistleblower who put forward that there was a $5 million bribery scheme between Ukrainian officials and Joe Biden when he was vice president. And Congressman Comer, who chairs the Oversight Committee, has asked for that information. Remember, it's the FBI form. It's the 1023 form that a confidential informant fills out. Remember, the House Oversight Committee oversees the federal government. They have a right to basically everything because they fund the federal government. They are the ones that write the check to keep the FBI open. So when they ask for information, usually they are supposed to get it unless there is an ongoing investigation. It doesn't seem like there is. Maybe there should be, but it doesn't look like there is an ongoing investigation into this matter. So there's this back and forth. Now they are threatening Logan, and we saw this a lot during the Obama years. Finally, Republicans saying it's not necessarily impeachment, but we are going to hold you in contempt, Christopher Wray, which can be prosecuted in court. We don't think Merrick Garland would do that, but it's kind of the next step below impeaching a cabinet member.
Yeah, it's headed that way. The question I guess I have for you, maybe you can explain this, is what that next step actually looks like. If you know that there's a good chance that he won't be, they won't do anything about this, do the American people see this as a waste of time, or should they see this actually as some accountability being held?
I think if you look at the big picture, holding someone in contempt doesn't take a ton of time.
Okay.
It's like a vote. So it's a regular kind of congressional vote. It happens in a committee, and I think then it happens on the floor, too. So, again, not a significant amount of time. It's not like impeachment where it takes so much aggressive time. You're only going to do this if he's ignoring the committee, which he can't do. He could even start coming back and forth with parts of the 1023 form, heavily redacted, and then start a negotiation with the committee instead of just ignoring them, which is what he is doing right now, because he must believe he's got the backing of the White House, obviously, and DOJ to do just that, because they don't want this form out there. They don't want to know whether or not the FBI investigated these allegations that Joe Biden accepted a $5 million bribe. And this all dates back to, the tip is dated back to June 30th of 2020. Ukrainian officials, this is interesting just to point out, on June 13th of 2020, okay, so 7 days before this informant tip is dated that Joe Biden was bribed with $5 million, and there's a $5 million bribery scheme when he was vice president. 7 days before that, a week before that in Kyiv, there was a press conference where Ukrainian officials showed $5 million in cash, allegedly offered as a bribe to end what? The investigation into the national gas company Burisma and its founder, Mykola Zolochevsky, who was on the board of Burisma until 2019 and certainly wouldn't want them to be investigated by Ukrainian prosecutors. Hunter Biden.
Yeah, always good to hear another Burisma. Whenever you hear Burisma, a lot of people's ears perk up, and we're sure you have some thoughts on that as well. When you hear $5 million scheme, when you hear Burisma, when you hear Ukraine, and
holding
Biden,
up the briefcases,
and you know that now something could be done, and we have some proof in it too. Give us a call, 1-800-684-3110. We'd love to hear from you on your thoughts on this. Or if you have any questions, also not just thoughts, ask a question, Jordan. You can ask one as well. 1-800-684-3110. Also support the work of the ACLJ by going to aclj.org. Later in the broadcast, we got Tulsi Gabbard and Mike Pompeo joining us, so it's going to be a stacked show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back in just a minute.
A Richmond FBI field office created an internal report asking its agents to engage with Catholic clergy members and church leaders to spot signs of radicalization. Richmond's FBI field office is now under the national spotlight. In January, that office created an internal report relayed throughout the Bureau, detailing measures to spot, quote, radicalization and, quote, suspicious activity in Catholic parishes, asking clergy and church leadership to get involved.
The memo reads, quote, interest of radically or ethnically or racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists in radical traditionalist Catholic ideology almost certainly presents new mitigation opportunities.
I've never encountered a radical traditional Catholic or any Catholic wanting to commit violence. This is insane, and it was a creature, I believe, of the Southern Poverty Law Center, which targets mainstream groups like the Alliance for Defending Freedom and just calls them a hate group. So you have a left-wing organization that targets a faith, and then here you have the FBI then falling right in line.
Is this how the FBI, under your direction and leadership, is this how they do their intelligence work? They look at left-wing advocacy groups to target Catholics? Is this what's going on? I mean, clearly it is. How is this happening?
The FBI is not targeting Catholics, and as I've said, this is an inappropriate memorandum, and it doesn't reflect the methods that the FBI is supposed to be using.
Us being faithful, dynamic, living Catholic life, living the Catholic life. We live in a world right now that there are certain individuals in the government that see that as a problem, that see that we should not be able to do that, that now if I espouse a traditional understanding of Christian marriage or human sexuality, that I'm seen as a problem, or even worse, that I need to be silenced. So what do we as Catholics do? We need to be faithful. We need to speak up. We ought not be afraid.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. We are taking your calls as well on a host of issues. So the FBI document, we got a call on that. We'll get to that in a moment. There's a lot of news involving the FBI this week on Capitol Hill. One that we are working on directly and that we filed just yesterday in federal court after we were on the air. It's in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia against, of course, the ACLJ, against the FBI, the defendants in the case. This is a complaint for a declaratory injunctive relief because, remember, the Richmond field office of the FBI targeting radical traditionalist Catholics, RTCs. Then they denied actually doing anything. They said it was just a one-off memo. That's what they always do, like when they targeted the Tea Party. This is one bad actor. We had them immediately take it down. Then we found out the memo made it all its way across the FBI field offices all across the country, and they had actually gone so far as to place someone undercover inside a Catholic church in Richmond. So that before the program, ultimately, we are told by Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray that it was shut down. So we are getting to the bottom of it through the FOIA. When we filed the FOIA with the FBI, I mean, it's not any clearer than you've got an actual document. You've got the actual bulletin the FBI put out. You've got the knowledge about informants going inside to recruit other informants inside the churches. You have the diagram of the FBI, and they're looking for these RTCs, which they connect to DVE, domestic violent extremism. They want to connect radical traditionalist Catholics. You think about Catholics who are pro-life and actually practice their faith are now seen as potential terrorists, domestic terrorists in our country. So we want to get to the bottom of course, who is putting this together at the FBI. When there was the freak out, was there an actual freak out, or did they just say, they caught us, take it down, and we'll do it under a different name? We really want to know, and is this still going on? We've also asked you, if you're at a church, a place of worship, and you believe that there's someone that's come in that is starting to ask questions, asking questions about, the church or extremism, we want you to contact us at aclj.org/help. That's aclj.org/help.
Yeah, let's go ahead and go to the phones. We're going to take your calls, 1-800-684-3110. Mary's calling from Maryland on line 1. You're on the air.
Hey there. It's wonderful to talk to you, and I thank you so much for taking my call and all that you do.
Sorry about that. So Mary was just curious again about more people being held accountable and how that actually works if they're not given if the Congress isn't given the ability to do so. But it seems like they could still push something forward.
The focus really is going to be, it's election year focus, right? So the focus is not necessarily Joe Biden getting criminally charged. That doesn't happen while he's president. Hunter Biden is under investigation. Some of this, the House committees who are Republican-led are trying to get this to the special counsel investigating Hunter Biden as quickly as possible because they believe that this is even more important than some of the allegations out there about what they might be charging him with. But Lord knows, I mean, I'll ask our producer, Will, how many weeks have we been talking about it looks like Hunter Biden's about to get popped with an indictment, and then another 2 weeks go by? I mean, it's just every 2 weeks.
Yeah, it seems like this is, I kind of even told the producers I'm a bit sick of talking about Hunter Biden because it does feel like we're on repeat. It feels like there's just another big piece of the puzzle happens, but again, there's not really progress, and that's maybe why you get frustrated. I think that's probably you're frustrated as one of our listeners going, okay, you've revealed more. Now you've revealed more. Now you've revealed more. When will you have some sort of reckoning if all of this is now becoming public record?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, there's two kinds of way to have reckoning. Elections, and don't tell me, oh, we can't win because they're rigged. We need to do, and I'm finally starting to see Republicans say it. Sean Hannity said it, and he's totally right. We need, if your state allows ballot harvesting, we need to do it. If your state allows early voting, we need to do it without an excuse. If your state sends out absentee ballots to everybody or anybody who wants to request one, we should have an absentee ballot chase program where we track those and do it. We need to use the full extent of the law, not anything illegal, but don't act like we're too good to use the legal methods available to win elections. If we do not, Democrats will continue to win. So that's part one of how you have an ultimate reckoning. Then number two is you put in a leader who is going to carry out that reckoning. And I think you've got a few of those running in the Republican field right now who would not be afraid of taking on Washington, D.C. and draining the swamp. Obviously, the one, Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis has had a similar message. And I even think people like Tim Scott, who might have a softer tone, they know how Washington works. They also know how to I think impact the system from the inside and the outside. So Nikki Haley, who's seen that as well. I mean, I think you go through the list.
Sure.
It's a lot of MAGA people and a lot of people who I think whoever it is would do much better than what we have right now and would understand that this is not just a talking point to Americans, but we want to see something done. I mean, I go to our ACLJ case. And will you ask Ben Sisney real quick how many cases we have against the FBI right now? Because this one is so important. We filed the FOIA. Remember we talked about earlier in the week that when those FBI whistleblowers started showing up and they were in tears before these committees because they had lost their jobs or been put on unpaid leave. So basically were living out of their cars. They couldn't even get their furniture because the FBI was moving them cross country and then keeping in storage facilities, not letting them access it. And in those situations, what most of them were testifying to was that the FBI is overinflating domestic violence extremism numbers by using January 6th instead of using it as one event, which is how you would think you would investigate it. Is that yes, there were people from all over the country, but they came together for one event, one cause. That was the driving force. And instead, they've broken them up into every town and city one of those individuals was found in. So it makes it look like when they arrest you in, Tulsa, or then they arrest somebody in Kansas City, and then they arrest somebody in eastern Washington State, and then somebody in Florida, that you've got, and they're arrested for domestic violent extremism against the U.S. government. It looks like, wow, this is happening all over the country, not just in January 6th. And what they were saying was all of these arrests were related to January 6th. There is not a purge of domestic violent extremism happening across the country. In fact, the number one killer of Americans is fentanyl. And, of course, those are brought over by the kind of criminal gangs and cartels that the FBI should be laser focused on disrupting and ultimately destroying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should go to this call because it's pretty important. And a lot of people have the question. Kate's calling in Colorado on line 3. Kate, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. It is time to fight fire with fire and start filing lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit against these people, just like they've done, yes, for Trump, which is the obvious target, but pro-life and Christians and conservatives. Why can we not get this ball rolling and do the same to them legitimately, of course, that they have done to all these other people and will continue to do and get worse at?
Well, we've got to get in charge of the DA's offices in the major cities. We've got to encourage good DAs to bring, like you said, legitimate cases when they are legitimate, against investigations when they're legitimate. But ultimately, when you're talking at the federal issue, we have no control over federal prosecutions right now. That is ultimately 100% up to the Merrick Garland and Joe Biden Department of Justice. So they are not going to do a lot of work, unfortunately, that you are going to like, especially if it touches the political space. Even outside of that, like, I wish I could say all this about Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray, but they were really going after the cartels, and fentanyl and the fentanyl deaths were decreasing, and our border was becoming more secure. And I would at least say, you know what? I don't like their policies. I hate what they're doing about dividing the country. But at least they're not just spending all their time on diversity training and domestic violent extremism.
People kind of felt that way with Clinton. I feel like the Clinton administration, it's like, you may not have liked him, and I did not. But at least Bill Clinton, there was a lot of sort of positivity going around in his presidency. Obviously, there was a lot of negative as well. But it seemed like there was a bit of thoughts of the economy was good. Things were a bit trending up. So that was the last time I remember a Democrat being in office and it not being, I mean, of course, it became personally very chaotic, but where there was sort of an overall agreement that things are okay.
Right.
Yeah. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Yeah. When we're going to continue taking phone calls, 1-800-684-3110. We come back, we're going to talk another Supreme Court case against Planned Parenthood that we are filing. This is another ACLJ case. We have been in court against Planned Parenthood since, I think, 2016 out in California in federal court. We have now appealed to on writ to the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll update you on that. Also, Chuck Schumer rips the MAGA Supreme Court.
This one's good.
When they voted 9-0. So we'll get into that as well. Harry Hutchinson is going to be joining us. And just to let you know, ACLJ active cases against the FBI right now. We have 5 active federal lawsuits against the FBI that we're in court over right now at the ACLJ. That does not include other intelligence agencies we have federal court cases against right now. 5 just with the FBI. Support our work. We'll continue to do more. Donate today at aclj.org.
When we see something, when we hear something, when we're concerned about an issue, we don't just talk about it. We do something about it. And that goes to our Government Accountability Project.
If we allow leaders in Washington, D.C. to make decisions behind closed doors, unaccountable to the people, then we are going to get skewed and corrupt decisions.
There are lots of other places that do lots of important work for America, but the ACLJ has taken up a lane which is irreplaceable.
The Freedom of Information Act, that's a statute that allows us to get information from the government. Starts with a letter from our offices in Washington to these agencies. And it says, give us this information on these topics. And generally, they don't. And then we go to court.
We go through a series of lengthy negotiations back and forth about what they'll give or what they won't give. We may get tons of information that's redacted, and we have to then go back and say, you redacted too much. We can't really find out what you're giving us because it makes no sense. So it goes through a process of litigation.
That is how you get information, and that office is going to be more active now more than ever.
The ACLJ has been extremely active in vigorously seeking to hold these bureaucrats accountable. We have filed hundreds of FOIA requests. We have received over 20,000 pages of documents in our litigation.
Holding them accountable, holding the Biden administration accountable so that all Americans are able to have faith in their government.
We will up our efforts. We will not stop.
You're finding a nugget in a gold mine. Occasionally you'll come up with something that is really a bombshell, but you have to persist in doing it, and that's what we do.
That's a little bit of what we do. through our Office of Government Accountability, and of course that comes under our Office of Government Affairs. So your support of the ACLJ supports all of that.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We are taking your calls to 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. I just want to update you quickly about an ACLJ case at the U.S. Supreme Court. We have filed against Planned Parenthood. It is a critical abortion case where they are trying to shut down pro-life speech. Surprise, surprise, Planned Parenthood trying to shut down pro-life speech in the United States of America. So the Americans Center for Law and Justice, just yesterday, actually today, the other case against the FBI was yesterday. This was this morning when we officially filed a petition for a writ of certiorari. So we're asking the Supreme Court to take the case to correct the unjust result in a major abortion case involving Planned Parenthood since early 2016. So when you talk about how committed the ACLJ is to the battles for freedom of speech, for life, for your rights, against government corruption, against government overreach, for good policies, against bad policies, this is an example of a case that has been going on for 7 years that we have never wavered from. And again, it does not cost our clients a dime to fight through that because of our donors at the ACLJ. We've been able to keep Planned Parenthood in court. They bring in the biggest law firms in the country. They try to wear you down, of course, wear down your resources as well. But you make sure we're able to fight back just as strongly, just as aggressively in court because of your financial contributions to the ACLJ. So this is a reminder to donate today just to one of these cases at aclj.org. It involved the case. It involves Troy Newman, our client, who was a former board member of the Center for Medical Progress. You remember they released those videos about the sale of aborted babies' body parts. And let me tell you something. Looking back at that now, Logan, I think that was obviously the judicial appointments that Donald Trump made to the U.S. Supreme Court were the major impetus for the overturning of Roe versus Wade. I think those videos were so damaging to Planned Parenthood. Not that it's worth them being in court trying to get these people, have judgments of millions of dollars, basically bankrupt them and shut them up forever. But I think that was the impetus to say, you know what? Maybe Roe versus Wade does go too far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also sort of, like I said, not only changed the narrative within how Americans see it, but maybe even how Planned Parenthood decided they could market themselves. We've seen a lot of changes in Planned Parenthood recently. They just laid off 700 people and decided to refocus that money to pro-life states to provide services other than abortion. So them actually saying, hey, we need some money if we're going to fund things that aren't abortion, which again is what we told you, that always that percentile is always ridiculous. But by laying off 700 members of their staff, that kind of shows you even how they're trying to figure out how to continue their business in a world post-Dobbs. Now, obviously, there's still plenty of states, and this is something we brought up a million times, there are plenty of states where the abortion laws are still very extreme. Obviously, there are some where they're extreme on the other side, the pro-life side, where there are no exceptions. On the other side, you have we'll fly you out there. There's so many different variations, and we're in court in most of those states still fighting it. But I know you wanted to discuss what we're also doing with Harry.
I did want to admit that they're going after our client here, and that's why we're appealing to the Supreme Court to over millions of dollars. There were Planned Parenthood officials actually prosecuted because these videos were released. So they were not distorted. They were correct, the videos that were released, and they have led to criminal prosecutions. Of course, we've ultimately seen the overturning of Roe versus Wade. But I do want to turn to another major case of the Supreme Court, and this is work we're going to be expanding on at the ACLJ into more economic cases, environmental policy cases. So get ready for that. You'll hear more about it from us at the ACLJ. A huge EPA case, Harry, that really should have not been a huge case. Tell people about it just first. It was a small home built by basically a creek that became a U.S. Supreme Court case.
Absolutely. So we have two homeowners, or at least hopeful homeowners, the Sacketts, Michael and Chantel Sackett. They lived in Iowa. The EPA attempted to prohibit them from building a home near a wetland several years ago. The EPA ordered the Sacketts to restore the site after they had commenced construction. They threatened penalties of over $40,000 per day. Justice Alito, in his majority opinion, stated that the EPA classified the wetlands on the Sackett's lot as waters of the United States because they were near a ditch that fed into a creek, which fed into a lake. And basically, the EPA claimed all of those waters as American-controlled waters. So this was an absurdity upon an absurdity, and the Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, ruled against the EPA's overreach. And then, in a stunning development, Senator Chuck Schumer claimed that this was a MAGA Supreme Court decision. In other words, he doesn't understand that a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court means that both liberals and conservatives agreed that the EPA had engaged in a tremendous overreach.
Yeah, we actually have that tweet up on the screen right now, and it says, this is from Chuck Schumer. This, again, he's retweeting a breaking news article from the Washington Post. But this MAGA Supreme Court has continued to erode our country's environmental laws. Make no mistake, this ruling will mean more polluted waters and more destruction of wetlands. We'll keep fighting to protect our waters. And, of course, Twitter had to – they put a fact check in there, which I enjoy, and they put all 9 judges agreed that the EPA overstepped its authority and that the plaintiff's property should not be subject to EPA regulations. So pretty interesting thing to have Chuck Schumer come out, make a big statement, almost as if he didn't read the article himself.
He obviously didn't, because the Washington Post headline doesn't say what the number was. That's because they didn't want to say that it was 9-0.
Yeah, they wanted to make it look.
Then they
like
tried to make it look like it was not really 9-0 because there are 4 judges who disagreed on the limits of the EPA authority with respect to wetlands. That's like that's what we refer to here. It's just that's not important to the actual decision. So they oftentimes disagree on that kind of language that's inside these opinions because it's not at the heart of what the opinion's about. But to me, it underscores that the reality that Chuck Schumer, did he ever correct the tweet, guys?
I don't think so.
Will ever correct it? He kept it up.
No, he wouldn't do that.
Kept it up. So he's
calling Sotomayor, Jackson, and Kagan MAGA justices. I'm sure they love that.
Yeah, MAGA justices. Remember, he thought MAGA justices deserved to be protested at their homes, Harry.
Absolutely. Chuck Schumer has made a habit of threatening Supreme Court justices in the past. He's likely to do it in the future. And what the American people need to do going forward is ensure that he no longer remains majority leader.
Is he going to unleash the whirlwind?
Yeah, maybe.
On Justice
Jackson and Sotomayor and Kagan. Yeah. I mean, in this definition.
Certainly they want to unleash the whirlwind on everyone else. On the Supreme Court.
But he also knows, sadly, thankfully, Twitter actually, I'm not for a fact checker kind of thing because we've had that happen to us.
This is their new thing, right?
But at least they went out there and put that, because if not, you know what really happens? Most Democrats see it. They don't also read the article. They don't see that it was 9-0, and that message gets across. And that's why I'm glad there's actually some people out there going, no, Republican or Democrat, we're going to actually make sure that you can't just randomly make a blanket statement and mislead people. That's all it is, misleading people.
Yeah. All right, folks, we will, again, continue to take your phone calls, 1-800-684-3110. A lot to talk about. We still have not gotten to on the show. Tulsi Gabbard is going to be joining us in the next segment of the broadcast. She's a senior analyst for the Sekulow broadcast. Mike Pompeo is going to be joining us. Of course, we're going into Memorial Day weekend. I know they'll both have something to say about that as well. Support the work of the ACLJ. Again, we talked about a number of ACLJ cases we just filed yesterday and today. We've got more coming next week. Donate today at aclj.org. We need your support.
The ACLJ has a 30-plus year history of fighting on behalf of you, our members, in support of life, abortion's murder, religious liberty.
A Turkish court has freed American pastor Andrew Brunson.
Justice, personal freedom, and constitutional government. Our freedoms are under attack. Now, more than ever.
We are not going back. Abortion is healthy.
Yet another week of violence.
They use their power and influence to push deeply un-American causes that threaten to destroy our country. Abortion on demand, socialism, inflation, cancel culture, weakness in the face of our adversaries. We owe it to our kids and grandkids to defend the things that make this country great. It's time to take the gloves off and uphold American values. Go to acljaction.org to learn more.
Informed and engaged. Now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. I do want to take some of your calls to 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. Coming up live, joining us, Tulsi Gabbard. We're going to talk about, again, the White House and Congress not being able to find, $3 billion to Ukraine, and they freed that up. But, of course, instead of putting that back into the account while they can't, reach a decision on the debt ceiling, I wanted to talk to her about that since she was a member of Congress on the other side of the aisle, and these debt ceiling discussions that would go on, the government shutdowns, the defaulting, all of that back and forth that seemed to kind of drive everybody crazy. And then ultimately you get to hopefully a goal that doesn't seriously negatively impact our U.S. economy in the short term. In the long term, we got to figure out spending. We're also going to be joined by Mike Pompeo on some State Department issues as well with Afghanistan. And on Memorial Day, he's written a new piece up at ACLJ.org. He writes exclusive content there. He's got 2 new pieces up this week, exclusive to the ACLJ. It's the only place you can find it. He's got one up on Memorial Day as well at ACLJ.org. But, Logan, we could go to the phones.
Yeah, let's go to Bill in Wyoming on line 2. Bill, welcome.
Hi, I appreciate you taking my call. Memorial Day greetings to everybody listening. I'm kind of frustrated because back in 2020, this administration, this is a 2-part question. Back in 2020, this administration guaranteed transparency. So that's my question, first part of the question. The second part is, if such is so, this is a rhetorical question. Why do we have to have all these FOIA requests in the first place?
Why do we need all these FOIA requests in the first place? Because when you have a large government, which we do, I think, listen, would it be nice not to have to file a FOIA? And honestly, would it be nice just to file the FOIA and not have to go to court? I think that's where the distinction is. You want a FOIA process. Those are like sunshine laws. The way it's supposed to work is that you want to find out more information about what the federal government is doing. So you file a FOIA. That doesn't mean you automatically have to go into court. But the problem has been that the agencies have set up a process that instead of complying with the FOIAs, since it does issue an opportunity for someone to go into court if they don't reply on time, they'd rather just not reply on time and drag it out in federal court and use the DOJ attorneys to do that for them. So that is the huge problem that we face constantly, Bill, inside when we're dealing with FOIA. You have to have a FOIA process, but it's supposed to work within 20 or 30 days. You're not supposed to have to go to court. That's supposed to be the rarity. Unfortunately, it's become the norm, but that is okay. If you're big enough and strong enough as the ACLJ, you get to the bottom of it, and ultimately, the American people get the info they rightfully deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. You should go visit aclj.org. I know I say it all the time, but right now you can get involved. You can get directly involved, whether that's in signing a petition or you can just read in the great content, watch the incredible videos. Obviously, subscribe on our YouTube and our Rumble channels because both of those put out great video content. If you're not much of a reader, we'll break it all down for you in video form. And you can find all these great articles posted by everyone you hear on this broadcast, whether that is Harry Hutchinson, who was on the last segment, or Mike Pompeo later on, and some of the great video content. We cover a lot of things on there, whether it's our specific cases, what's going on in the news, what's going on, and how your faith impacts your politics, and all of that is on aclj.org. And, of course, you can make a donation, which is how this all works. We're a completely independent organization. I want that to be very clear. We see a lot of world right now where you notice that maybe those who are running the show aren't in your best interest. You know, maybe there's a great pocket of people putting on a show. Well, the person who owns that show doesn't always agree. Here's the deal. The ACLJ is completely independent. We are fully backed and fully supported by people like you. So all you have to do is go to aclj.org, make a donation. Not only does it keep this broadcast on the air, but it also funds all of the legal work that we do, whether it's for you or whether it is to take on our government when absolutely necessary, and it is absolutely necessary. We'll be taking your calls coming up also, 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. In our next segment, we'll be joined by Tulsi Gabbard. You're going to make sure you stay tuned for that. We'll be back in just a minute. But again, aclj.org. We appreciate you. Go take a look over there. We'll be right back.
All right, here we go, folks. You know, fruits and vegetables, we're also told that we need to eat them. And I admit, I don't make the best food choices all the time, though I'm trying to do a much better job now. Maybe you've even noticed.
Yeah.
If you have, put it in the chat.
Yeah,
I'd
be
love
nice
to hear
to
some
hear.
positive feedback. Though you only see me from head up anyways. I kind of know how to fake it anyways. A little bit of nice lighting we have in production team. But, you know, the CDC says I should eat 6 cups of fruits and veggies a day. There's zero chance that's happening because it's not just like the 6 pieces of watermelon I'd love and the 6 pieces of some vegetable I particularly like. It's and doing that 6 times a day. It's very specific fruits and vegetables that are just difficult to get, especially when you're busy. You got kids, you got work, you're running around all the time. You just don't have time for it. But you do want to be healthy because when you do eat healthy, you live longer, you have less heart disease, and you have less cancer. So it's important. And we want you to get healthier with us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we encourage you to check out Field of Greens, and we'll tell you why. Because unlike you said, other the fruits and veggie supplements, each one has specific fruit and vegetables that you need in Field of Greens. They're all medically selected, and they're going to help you out, whether that's, like you said, heart health, liver, kidney health, immune system, and you can take Field of Greens to stay healthy. And what I want to encourage you to do is check out Field of Greens, because also they support this broadcast. I always say that. I think it's important for me to point out when there is someone who comes on board as a sponsor of this show, that means they also are willing to be a sponsor of this show, which sometimes becomes harder and harder. So what I'm going to encourage you to do, I'm going to help you get started. I got you 15% off your first order, plus another 10% off if you subscribe for a recurring order. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use the promo code J. That's J-A-Y. Again, that is Field of Greens, like the color green, but greens, vegetables.com, promo code. Make sure you put that in because it tells them that you heard about it here, and you get the discount, J, J-A-Y.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. We are joined by our senior analyst for military and political affairs, Tulsi Gabbard, a former member of Congress, a person who serves our military, who has run for president as well. So a whole host of issues I want to get to, Tulsi. Right off the bat, I just want to ask you about the importance of Memorial Day to you as someone who continues to serve our country in our armed forces. And we know that there's men and women, even when we don't have mass scale conflicts going on around the world that Americans are involved in, that every time you put that uniform on, even in training, that you are risking your life.
Jordan, Memorial Day is just one day of year to mark, remember, and honor our brothers and sisters who paid the ultimate price. You know, those we've served with, our brothers and sisters who did not make that long trip home with us. We hold them in our hearts every single day. We hold their Gold Star families in our hearts every single day. Memorial Day marks a year where we as a country come together to make sure that their memories are never forgotten. I was just at Fort Bragg over these last couple of days, joining my fellow service members as well as Gold Star families in a number of different ceremonies to really celebrate that sacrifice, to celebrate that selflessness, and celebrate how it truly embodies their love of country. This is such an important time for us to remember them and to remember why they raised their right hand and volunteered to put their lives on the line. It's these fundamental principles of freedom and our ability to pursue life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It's incredibly important now, especially as we have the Biden administration and the cabal of the most powerful entities in our country, the propaganda media, some in the national security state, big tech, all working together to undermine those fundamental freedoms. So we've got to remember what our brothers and sisters sacrificed their lives for, and do everything that we can every day that we are alive to honor their memory by standing up for those freedoms.
So important to get that message across. We'll make sure we get that message to all of our folks on social media as well. You've, I'm sure, been involved with these debt ceiling negotiations and discussions that kind of drive the American people, I think, a little bit crazy. Are we going to default? Is there actually going to be a deal? How much are we going to extend spending by? How much are we actually going to cut spending by? Does it really all matter? Where do you think we are right now when it comes to that? Ultimately a deal getting done between this White House and really the Republicans in Congress?
Hey, Jordan, it looks like, at least today, it looks like they're making progress in their conversations. Tomorrow we'll see what news brings then. But, the thing that I found so frustrating while I was serving in Congress, and I think the thing most people are frustrated about now, is that it seems to be more about partisan political gamesmanship and getting the talking point that will help in the next election than it is really about sitting down and having those good faith negotiations to bring this country's spending under control. And this is part of the problem here, is you have fundamental differences where you've got people like AOC giving speeches on the House floor who basically believes there should be no cap on spending, that we should spend how much, because you just print more money and there's no consequence in her mind, not recognizing the debt and deficit that we have in this country that continues to grow day by day. In all honesty, Democrats and Republicans have both over the years contributed to where we are right now. That should be accepted as a fact. Got it? Can't change the past. Action needs to be taken now from both sides to bring things under control, to start to cut spending. And I think that the proposals that Kevin McCarthy is putting forward, they are common sense. They're not these radical proposals that the Democrats are making them out to be. So regardless, both sides are going to have to give in order for this deal to be done. We will see if they do what is best for the country rather than what's best for the party.
People kind of understand if you're an able-bodied American who can work and get a job, you shouldn't be on the government payroll. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have government programs to keep social safety net. We want to have that as a country that's a leader in the world for the people who need that. But I wanted to point to another issue because it ties into all the spending and the just amount of money we talk about when we are talking about federal government spending. There's a Pentagon overestimated the value of the ammunition, missiles, and other equipment that we sent to Ukraine by around $3 billion. And the way they're reporting it, I love this, Tulsi. The only way they're reporting it is this is an era that may lead the way for more weapons being sent to Ukraine, not putting money aside to maybe our own military or replenishing our what has been used on the battlefield to make sure that America has the weapons it needs. The way that it's being reported immediately is, wow, we found this $3 billion accounting error so we can spend more money in Ukraine. And there's like no other option for that money.
This makes me so mad. This makes me so mad for many reasons. Number one, they are making it sound like there are not other needs in the military that have to be met. And oops, we made a pencil error on the piece of paper, so now we've got this extra $3 billion to send to Ukraine. And yet the Pentagon has not passed an audit in our lifetimes. They have failed numerous times. So because this one was discovered, I guarantee you there are more. They can't keep track of the money that they're spending and that they have been allotted. Number two, they refuse to pass legislation in Congress to track the money and the funding that's going to Ukraine to know, hey, how is that money being spent? Obviously, I disagree with the over $100 billion of our taxpayer dollars that have gone to Ukraine, but at a minimum, they won't even allow those dollars to be accounted for. When this accounting error was discovered, Jake Sullivan, who's the national security advisor for Joe Biden, told Jake Tapper on CNN, I'm going to read this quickly because it shows how out of touch they are. He tells Jake Tapper, at the end of the day, not one penny of U.S. dollars will have gone missing or have been misallocated. It will all be provided in the form of equipment to Ukraine on the battlefield. Of course, it would be better to get it right in terms of the accounting up front. The Pentagon corrected the error. Ukraine will get what it needs, and the American taxpayer will be confident that this money is being spent effectively and appropriately. He says not one penny of U.S. dollars will have gone missing. Are you kidding me? Who's supposed to believe this after we saw through the Afghanistan papers, as we've seen evidence time and time again, trillions of dollars that have gone unaccounted for, and now you want us to believe that all of a sudden every penny that they send to Ukraine will be best allocated, that there's all of a sudden no corruption in Ukraine? Meanwhile, we have soldiers, service members, families here at home who are struggling. In my home state of Hawaii, the cost of living allowance that's given to soldiers overseas who have to spend more in a high cost of living environment, that's being cut by almost $600 in some families' cases. Drastic cuts. And they cannot tell me that the cost of gas has gone down in Hawaii. It has not. They can't tell me the cost of groceries has gone down in Hawaii. It has not. And yet families in Hawaii stationed there, Marines, airmen, sailors, and soldiers, they're having to figure out, okay, how are we going to have to cut back now? Because apparently our government thinks that things cost less. It makes no sense. They are not good custodians of taxpayer dollars, and they are wasting our taxpayer dollars in areas where they are not needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where people really had that big problem and have had sort of a bigger, broader issue now as the war has progressed and continued on. They're a bit exhausted from it, but you also have the situation where even years ago we were putting, not years ago, like last year, we were putting all of our service members on food stamps and that kind of situation. We go, okay, we're willing to spend the money. Americans are willing to spend the money to support our military families. I think those are one of the few places that probably universally everyone can agree, yeah, that's okay. Let's help them. Let's help them with their groceries, help them with these things they're serving for us. Instead of sending this money to ridiculous situations or putting money in places where, and then there's the debt ceiling. There's all these things that pile up financially that feel like they just get lost. And the soldiers and all the military people who we really at least should be taking care of their basic needs are getting lost in this.
Because I'd say going in, Tulsi, to this Memorial Day weekend, and we remember the brave who have fallen to protect our rights and liberties so we can have these conversations and not be afraid and be able to have serious debates in our country and have all of our different views and political views and religious views, is that the military is having a tough time recruiting right now.
Yeah.
Get tougher, and that is not good for the United States.
We need leaders who will act in the best interest of our country, our security, and our freedoms. We are being failed by the leaders we have right now, and we need to remember that and bring about that change in these coming elections for the sake of our fallen, for the sake of our country, and for the sake of our future.
We always appreciate you joining us on the broadcast, a member of our broadcast team, as Tulsi Gabbard, our senior analyst for military and political affairs. We come back. Mike Pompeo is going to be joining us. He's got a new piece up on Memorial Day as well. We're going to get into some of those Afghanistan papers that Tulsi mentioned as well. I just think it's so important as we go into Memorial Day weekend. We remember, as so many of us have, pool parties and barbecues, and I think that's okay. That's a very American thing to do. Is that we remember why we have that day off on Monday. If you are so blessed to have it off, a lot of Americans are going to be working, and a lot of servicemen and women stationed around the world, they will be working on that Memorial Day. That we have to remember what these holidays are about and teach our kids why we take the time. It's not just for a pool party. It's to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice. We'll be right back on Sekulow with Mike Pompeo. You don't want to miss it.
An accounting error has apparently freed up billions more dollars in aid for Ukraine. That's according to multiple congressional and administration officials who say the White House made an accounting error assessing the value of the military support that was given to Ukraine to date.
We have a problem in the Department of Defense and have had it for at least 2 or 3 decades. We can't really audit the defense budget. Nobody really knows how much money is spent and where it all goes.
Not one penny of U.S. dollars will have gone missing or have been misallocated. It will all be provided in the form of equipment to Ukraine on the battlefield. But of course, it would be better to get it right in terms of the accounting up front. In the end, though, the Pentagon discovered the error, the Pentagon corrected the error, and Ukraine will get what it needs, and the American taxpayer will be able to be confident that this money is being spent effectively and appropriately.
Yeah, the thing about the Pentagon is, Brett, everything is big. So even in accounting area, I mean, it's hard to get your head around a $3 billion accounting area. But when you're dealing with the Pentagon, size is really a factor here.
The Wall Street Journal wrote that, for example, the Pentagon overstated the cost of replacing the M777 howitzers it provided to Ukraine by looking at the price tag on the HIMARS mobile missile launcher system, a far more advanced system slated to succeed the older artillery pieces in the U.S. arsenal. Overall, that cost difference resulted in an overcounting of $75 million, a Pentagon official said.
Let's leave no doubt that a country like the U.S. facing $30 trillion in debt can still afford such accounting errors. The debt crisis has left President Biden in a limbo.
So we're going to end up spending a lot more to replace things than we did to begin with. It's a racket, Dan.
And there it is.
I'm sure you know that.
Yep.
Hi, welcome back to Sekulow. We are joined by our senior advisor, Mike Pompeo, senior counsel for global affairs, former Secretary of State. Secretary Pompeo, you have a new piece up at ACLJ.org. You've got two new ones this week at ACLJ.org, and those are exclusive to our website as part of our, you're a member of our team here at the ACLJ. And this one is on the holiday weekend, and you note, while it's the kickoff of summer, and Americans are surely excited about that, and kids are excited about that across the country, as school comes to a close, that we cannot forget why we have Memorial Day. What do you want people to take away from the article you have up? I think this is a great one for folks to share today and over the weekend with their friends and family, so that while you're having your barbecues, while you're coming together as family, you remember why we have this day off.
Yeah, Jordan, thanks. This one was from the heart for sure. I hope folks will take this ACLJ piece and send it to their cousins, their friends, maybe their coworkers, and just remind people how blessed we are. You're an American citizen. You have a blue passport. You have all the freedoms. We have, Jordan, we spent a lot of time talking about the problems that face our country today. These men and women who have given their lives on behalf of us to give us all of these things. The fact that we can have this debate, we can have this discussion. This weekend is to remember them. I had this incredible privilege to serve for 4 years, but a couple times along the way, I had the burden of heading out to Dover Air Force Base to greet the families when their loved ones were coming home, having taken the full cost, the full measure of their lives for this country. I think back to those days. I think back to those families. They are amazing people. And every American this weekend should go out, have fun, do the things we do here in America. The men and women who lost their lives would want us to do that. But make no mistake, we should spend a little bit of time praying for them, thinking about them, and thinking about the families as well.
Yeah, you draw attention to the Gold Star families, the wives, the husbands, the mothers, the fathers, the children who've lost their loved ones in the line of duty, and how we remember them on Memorial Day. What do you say to someone who's just listening to say, I've got this event, my kids are excited, it's the beginning of summer and we're going to this event, but, just to tell people as a former Secretary of State, as someone who went to West Point, served in the military, what would you tell them is just a way they can kind of stand with those who live this every day?
It's really easy and important that we do all of that. Look, when you're headed out to the picnic or to the ballpark with you, just take a couple minutes to stop your kids from playing games, get them off their device, and tell them a story. Tell you about someone in your neighborhood that served in uniform. Tell them about a story about a grandpa who served in World War II, or an uncle who served in Vietnam or in Iraq. Just remind them, tell them real stories that will touch their lives in ways that I think the next generation has to do. We've talked about this before. Now, a very small fraction of adults here in America have actually served in uniform in the United States, and remind them of the stories. The reason those people choose to do that some of them don't come home to their families. And on Memorial Day, we should remember them, and we should thank them both in deeds, in the way that we act, in passing it down to the next generation, and reminding ourselves too how blessed we are to be part of this country that those men and women gave their lives for.
Yes, absolutely. I think there are a lot of our listeners who obviously feel that way. They want to show their appreciation, want to show their respect, and figure out ways to do that. Like you said, I think it's a great idea. Tell your kids about this. Sit them down. Talk to them why it's important. Why is it necessary? My kids have been following just by osmosis, by being around a lot of what's happening in the world of politics, just because we'll have the news on, we'll have something on, whether that's an announcement from a DeSantis, an announcement from someone else, and they're following, they're asking a lot of questions. But there are some universal questions that can kind of break all of these political cycle, and a lot of that has to do with our nation's military. I also encourage you, we put out a documentary, and Secretary Pompeo, you were in it, a number of people were in it, including Wes Smith from our office, who was one of the person who set up the Dover Air Force Base for the memorial services. You can go really find a deep dive on that on our documentary. It's called Revenge of the Taliban. It was right after and during, real time during, we rolled it out during the horrible withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I do think, and that's on our website, aclj.org, or on our YouTube channel as well. But Secretary Pompeo, I do think that was an eye-opening moment for a lot of people. What all went down in Afghanistan with the withdrawal and things getting botched. And it's hard to not feel political even on these weekends, because it feels like the idea of just supporting your military, whether that is financially, whether that is personally, or whether that is politically, ends up becoming this divided line politically, unfortunately.
Oh, goodness. I see that from time to time as well. It can't be the case. It is possible to both be horrified by the way this administration abandoned those men and women of Afghanistan and resulted in the death of 13 Americans. It didn't have to be the case. But it's not tragic because it was a Democrat president that did it. It's tragic because it was an American president that allowed that to happen. And that's what we all need to remind ourselves. I should take a special moment here. For those of you who served in Afghanistan, be proud. That moment was unbearable. That moment was indecent. That moment was a bad political decision by the president, a bad strategic decision. But your service in Afghanistan was important and noble and saved lives. And so if you have a brother, a sister, a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, a friend who served in Afghanistan, remind them that this former Secretary of State loves them and knows that their work saved American lives. I know it happened. Thank every one of our servicemen and women who served in Afghanistan for what they did.
Absolutely. Bringing up Afghanistan, I think it's important on this Memorial Day. Finally, the State Department has given access to Congress on the Biden Afghanistan documents after the GOP had to ultimately threaten to hold members of the executive branch in contempt of Congress. So on Memorial Day, we remember those 13 U.S. service members who were killed in Kabul during the botched withdrawal. But we're also going to get more oversight. I think finally the State Department, which you used to oversee, and the White House buckled to the House saying, we are not going to let this go away. We want this info so that if we are engaged in conflict, which unfortunately the U.S. will likely be again, or that we will never have a withdrawal like that again.
Jordan, we have to learn. We have to be better. We have to honor the men and women who had their lives tragically taken that day in August. We have to get that right. I'm glad that Congress is investigating. I hope that the hearings and proceedings will proceed in a bipartisan way, looking to get the facts so that something like this is very, very, very unlikely to ever happen again. They deserve it. Every service member deserves to get this right.
As always, we appreciate all of your insight, Secretary Pompeo.
Yeah, the new article is up on our website at aclj.org.
That's right. So I really do encourage people. We'll make sure it's kind of the focus of the weekend on our social media accounts. We'll share it a number of times. It's exclusive to the ACLJ, where Secretary Pompeo writes a couple pieces a week for us as, again, Senior Counsel for Global Affairs. And so this one, as his role as CIA Director, as Secretary of State in the military, in Congress, at a West Point grad himself, it's a great person to get that perspective from on Memorial Day. So make sure, as you're looking for information, remind people about why we have this special weekend, and that you can still go and celebrate. Because I think most of those who lost their life for defending our country would want you to be celebrating. It's because that's why they fought, so that you would be able to live and their kids would live and their families would live in a country that had this kind of freedom and liberty. Even when things seem down, we have it so much better than the rest of the world. We just want to keep it that way. So that's the truth. So remember to thank, again, service members, to remember those we have lost. Check out Mike Pompeo's piece up at aclj.org. And, of course, if you can, support the work of the ACLJ. On all the issues we've discussed today, we are involved in directly in court or in Congress or around the world. Donate today, aclj.org. We'll talk to you next week.